The Great Hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as Ambassador Hanwu walked to the center platform. His black shoes made soft clicking sounds on the polished metal floor. Around him, hundreds of alien beings watched from their seats. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had scales that changed color when they were angry or excited. A few looked almost like humans. But with extra eyes or strange-colored skin, Hanwu had given many speeches in this hall over the past 10 years. He had helped stop wars. He had made peace between enemies. He had solved problems that seemed impossible. Today would be his last speech here. The tall Vorthan counselor leaned forward in his chair. His gray skin looked like stone, and his four arms were folded across his chest. Next to him sat a Kalani elder, her long neck swaying slowly as she breathed. Her people were thousands of years old as a species, and they moved like they had all the time in the world. Behind them, the Zephyrian military commander stood at attention. His red eyes glowed in his wolf-like face. Council members, Hanwu began, his voice clear and calm. I speak today not just for myself, but for all of humanity. A low rumble came from the Vorthan section. They always made noise when they were thinking. The Kalani stayed perfectly quiet. As was their way, Zephyrians clicked their claws against their chairs. Hanwu looked around the room slowly. He had memorized every face here. For 300 years, humans had worked with these beings. They had built the quantum gates that let ships travel between stars in minutes instead of years. They had created the translation systems that let different species talk to each other. They had stopped countless wars and solved thousands of problems. But the Council had never truly accepted humans as equals. 3 centuries ago, Hanwu continued, humanity joined the galactic community. We were young, we were eager, we wanted to help and to learn. The Vorthan counselor, the Ziska, made a deep sound in his throat. Yes, humans have been useful, he said. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. Your people have fixed many problems. But why do you waste our time with history lessons? Hanwu smiled, but there was no happiness in it, because history is ending today, Counselor the Ziska. At least our shared history. Kalani elder named Cythera raised her long, thin hand. When she spoke, her voice was soft like wind through leaves. What do you mean, Ambassador Hanwu? I mean that humanity is withdrawing from all galactic affairs, effective immediately. The hall erupted in noise. Vorthans rumbled loudly. Kalani hissed in surprise. Zephyrians roared and showed their teeth. Smaller species chattered and squeaked. It took several minutes for order to return. The SSK stood up, all 4 of his arms spread wide. This is nonsense. Humans cannot simply leave. You have duties. You have responsibilities, do we? Hanwu asked. For 300 years we have served this council faithfully. We have solved your problems and fixed your mistakes. But when we ask for a permanent seat on this council, you say no. When we propose democratic reforms, you ignore us. When we request equal treatment, you tell us we are too young, too new, too different. The Zephyrian commander, Broktor, snarled, humans are useful tools. Tools do not need seats on councils. The words hung in the air like poison. Several other aliens nodded in agreement. This was exactly the problem. After 3 centuries of service, most of the galaxy still saw humans as useful servants, not as partners. Hanwu reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. It looked like a simple black rectangle, but it was much more than that. This is the master control for the quantum gate network, he said. Every gate in the galaxy is connected to this device. Only humans know how to build these gates. Only humans know how to maintain them. The Ziska's gray skin turned darker. You would not dare threaten us. I am not threatening anyone, Hanwu replied calmly. I am simply stating facts. This network was built by humans. It is maintained by humans. Without humans, it will not function. Scythia leaned forward. Surely you do not mean to destroy the gates. Millions would die if trade stopped. We will not destroy anything, Hanwu said. But we will no longer maintain what we built. Every human scientist, engineer, diplomat, and peacekeeper in council space is returning to Earth, starting today. The room exploded in angry voices. Again, this time, it took much longer for quiet to return. When it did, the Siska's voice was dangerous and low. The council will not allow this. We will force humans to stay. Hanwoo looked at him with sad eyes. With what? Your armies? Fleets? Counselor, in the past 50 years alone, humans have prevented 7 major wars, stopped 12 plague outbreaks, and solved over 3,000 trade disputes. We did this not through force, but through understanding, through cooperation, through finding ways for different peoples to work together. He paused and looked around the room again. But you never learned how to do these things yourselves. You never had to. You always had humans to solve your problems for you. Broktor stood up, his red eyes blazing. We do not need humans. Are strong? We are capable. Are you? Hanwoo asked. When was the last time the Vorthans and the Nexari spoke directly to each other without human translators? When did the Kalani and the Zephyrians work together on any project without human mediators? How many of your species understand the technology that keeps your worlds alive? The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the silence of anger, but of dawning realization. Hanwoo activated the device in his hand. Lights began blinking across its surface. As I speak, every human in council space is receiving orders to return home. Dr. Sunho is leaving the Centauri. Gate Station. Commander Tejin is withdrawing the peacekeeping forces from the Outer Rim. Engineer. Park is shutting down the atmospheric processors on New Harmony, Cythera said, her voice suddenly urgent. New Harmony has 2 billion inhabitants. Without those processors, they will die, Hanwoo finished. Unless someone else learns how to maintain the systems. Unless someone else takes responsibility. Ziska slammed one of his massive fists on his chair. This is madness. You cannot abandon your duties. These were never our duties, Hanwoo said quietly. They became our duties because you let them. Because it was easier to let humans solve problems than to learn how to solve them yourselves. He walked toward the exit, then stopped and turned back. The galaxy is yours now, council members. Do with it what you will. But do not expect humans to clean up your mistakes anymore. As Hanwoo left the Great Hall, the council members sat in stunned silence. For the first time in 3 centuries, they were truly alone with their problems. Outside the building, Hanwoo looked up at the alien sky one last time. Tomorrow, he would be on a ship, heading for Earth. In a few months, every human would be gone from council space. The galaxy was about to learn what life was like without humans to hold it together. 3 months had passed since the humans left. At first, the Galactic Council thought everything would continue as normal. They were wrong. The Iska sat in his office on the Vorthan homeworld, staring at reports that made his gray skin turn darker. With worry, trade between the Vorthans and the Nexari had completely stopped. What started as a small disagreement about mining rights had grown into something much worse. The problem was simple to understand, but it's impossible to solve. The Vorthans wanted to mine rare metals from an asteroid field near Nexari space. The Nexari said the asteroids were sacred and could not be touched. In the past, a human diplomat would have found a way to make both sides happy. Now there were no human diplomats left. The Siska had tried to negotiate himself. The meeting lasted only 2 hours before it fell apart completely. The Nexari ambassador, Quintel, had started the meeting with a 3-hour ceremony honoring the spirits of space. The Siska had walked out after 15 minutes, calling it a waste of time. This insulted the Nexari so badly that they refused to speak to any Vorthon. Again, how did the humans make this look so easy? The Siska muttered to himself. His assistant, a younger Vorthan named Krendu, brought him another report. Sir, the situation is getting worse. The Nexar have closed their borders to all Vorthan ships. Our merchants cannot reach the Outer Rim. Markets Diska crushed the report in his massive hand. The Nexari are being foolish. Those asteroids are just rocks floating in space. How can rocks be sacred? I do not know, sir, Krendu said carefully. But Ambassador Lee used to say that understanding why something is important to another species is the first step to making peace. Ambassador Lee had been the human diplomat who worked with the Vorthans for 20 years. She had always seemed to know exactly what to say to make angry beings calm down. Daziska had never paid attention to how she did it. He had assumed it was some kind of human trick that was not important to learn. Now, he wished he had listened more carefully. On the other side of the galaxy, Kalani were having their own problems. Elder Cythera floated in her meditation pool, trying to find inner peace. It was not working. The water around her kept changing from blue to red, showing her emotional distress. The quantum gate in the Kalani system had been making strange noises. For weeks, sometimes it would flash with wrong colors. Other times it would hum in a way that made nearby electronics stop working. The Kalani engineers had no idea what was wrong with it. Dr. Sunho had been the human engineer who maintained all the gates in this sector. Before he left, he had given the Kalani a thick manual explaining how to care for the gates. The manual was written in simple language that any engineer could understand, but the Kalani engineers were having trouble following the instructions. The manual said to check the quantum resonance chambers every 15 days. Kalani had been checking them every 30 days because 15 seemed too frequent. The manual said to replace the crystal matrices when they turned from blue to yellow. The Kalani waited until they turned orange because yellow still seemed bright enough. The manual said these small differences mattered. The Kalani had thought. The humans were being too careful, too worried about tiny details that probably did not matter. Now the gate was breaking down, staring, and no one knew how to fix it. Young engineer Velcora swam up to Elder Cythera with a tablet full of error codes. Elder, the gate's computer systems are showing 12 different warnings. I've tried to fix them using the human manual, but nothing works. Cythera's neck drooped sadly. What do the error codes mean? I do not know, Velcora admitted. Manual explains what each code means, but it uses many technical words I have never heard before. Dr. Sunho used to explain these things in ways we could understand. The elder remembered how Dr. Sunho would visit every month. He would spend hours checking the gate, making small adjustments, and teaching the Kalani engineers what to look for. He never seemed impatient, even when he had to explain the same thing many times. The Kalani had always been proud of their ancient wisdom and deep understanding of the universe. But they were starting to realize that wisdom about the stars was different from wisdom about machines far away. On the planet Kepler 442b, much more serious problems were developing. The planet had no natural atmosphere that could support life. 2 billion beings lived there only because of the atmospheric processors that Engineer Park had designed. The processors were amazing machines. They took poisonous gases from the planet's air and turned them into oxygen that people could breathe. They worked automatically, adjusting themselves as conditions changed. Engineer Park had programmed them to handle almost any situation. Almost any situation, but not all of them. Station Chief Morval was a Zephyrian who had been put in charge of the atmospheric systems after the humans left. He was a good soldier, but he knew nothing about complex machines. For 3 months, the processors had worked perfectly without any help from him. This made him confident that they would continue working forever. He was wrong, the processors. Main computer had been sending warning messages for 2 weeks. The messages said the system needed a software update to handle a new type of volcanic gas that was coming from the planet's core. Without the update, the processors would not be able to clean the air properly. Morval had seen the messages, but he could not understand what they meant. The words were too technical. He had tried to contact other worlds for help, but the quantum gate problems were making communication difficult. The processors were designed to shut down safely if they detected gases they could not handle. This was meant to protect the machines from damage. But it also meant that if the software was not updated soon, 2 billion people would have no clean air to breathe. Engineer Park had always updated the software herself during her monthly visits. She would arrive with new programs that taught the processors how to handle different types of problems. The updates took only a few hours, but they required knowledge that took years to learn. Morval tried reading the technical manuals that Engineer Park had left behind. The words might as well have been written in an alien language. He understood that the processors needed updates, but he had no idea how to create them. Back on the Vorthon homeworld, Ziska received a message that made his worst fears come true. The Nexari had declared war on the Vorthons. Their fleets were already moving toward Vorthon space. In the past, the Galactic Peacekeeping Force would have stopped the war before it started. Commander Tejin and his mixed teams of humans and aliens had prevented dozens of conflicts by getting between angry fleets and forcing them to talk instead of fight. But Commander Taijin was gone. The peacekeeping force still existed, but it was now led by General Rothvex, Zephyrian, who believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. When General Rothvex heard about the coming war, he sent his fleets to protect Vorthon space. But instead of trying to stop the fighting, he prepared to win it. The Zephyrian way was to hit the enemy so hard that they would never fight again. This was exactly the wrong approach. The Nexari saw the approaching Zephyrian warships as proof that the Vorthons were planning to attack them. They sent more of their own ships to defend themselves. Soon, instead of a small conflict over mining rights, the galaxy was facing a major war between 3 different species. The war began when a Nexari scout ship fired on a Zephyrian patrol. The Zephyrian captain, following his military training, fired back with much heavier weapons. The Nexar ship was destroyed instantly. The Nexari called this an act of unprovoked aggression. The Zephyrians called it self-defense. The Vorthans called it a disaster that could have been prevented if everyone had just been reasonable. All 3 species were right in their own way. But being right did not stop the shooting. Within days, ships were fighting across multiple star systems. Trade routes became battlefields. Civilian planets were caught in the middle. Thousands of beings died in the first week alone. The Galactic Council called emergency meetings, but they could not agree on what to do. The Kalani wanted to study the situation carefully before taking action. The remaining Vorthons demanded immediate military intervention. The Zephyrians wanted to destroy anyone who threatened the peace in the past. Human diplomats would have found a way to bring the fighting species together. They would have listened to everyone's concerns and created a solution that addressed the real problems behind the conflict. But there were no human diplomats left. The council members could only argue with each other while the galaxy burned around them. As the second month of war began, a terrible truth became clear. The aliens had become so dependent on human help that they had forgotten how to solve their own problems. The galaxy was falling apart. No one knew how to put it back together. 6 months after the humans left, the galaxy was dying. Elder Cythera floated in her council chamber, watching news reports from across known space. Every screen showed the same terrible story: war, famine, and system failures, spreading like a disease from world to world. The war between the Vorthons, Nexari, and Zephyrians had grown beyond anyone's control. What started as a fight over asteroid mining rights now involved 17 different species. Each time the Galactic Council tried to send peacekeepers, the situation got worse instead of better. General Rothvex had replaced Commander Tejin as head of Galactic Peacekeeping. But where Tejin had built teams with members from many different species working together, Rothvex only trusted other Zephyrians. His soldiers were brave and strong, but they solved every problem the same way, with bigger weapons and louder threats. When Rothvex sent peacekeepers to stop a battle between Vorthon and Nexori fleets, his ships arrived and immediately demanded that both sides surrender. The Vorthons, who valued strength, saw this as reasonable. The Nexari, who valued honor, saw it as an insult. Instead of 2 sides fighting, there were now 3. The humans never did it this way, Cythera whispered to herself as she watched another battle report. Commander Tejin would send mixed teams: Kalani for wisdom, Vorthons for practical solutions, Zephyrians for strength, and humans to help. Them all worked together, but without humans to bridge the gaps between different ways of thinking, the mixed teams had fallen apart. Kalani officers wanted to study each situation carefully before acting. Vorthon officers wanted to solve problems quickly and efficiently. Zephyrian officers wanted to show strength to prevent future problems. These different approaches led to constant arguments instead of effective action. The peacekeeping force had become 3 separate armies that happened to wear the same uniforms. They were more likely to fight each other than to stop wars. Meanwhile, the quantum gate network was collapsing faster than anyone had expected. 17 gates had already failed completely, cutting off entire star systems from the rest of the galaxy. The remaining gates were becoming unreliable and dangerous. Young engineer Velcora had been working day and night trying to fix the gate in Kalani space. She had read every manual the humans left behind. She had studied every technical document. But the more she learned, the more she realized how little she understood. The quantum gates were not just machines. They were incredibly complex systems. That required knowledge from dozens of different scientific fields. The humans had combined physics, engineering, computer science, biology, and even psychology to create devices that could safely bend space and time. Each alien species had focused on becoming experts in one or two areas. The Kalani understood theoretical physics but struggled with practical engineering. The Vorthans were excellent engineers but did not understand the biological effects of quantum travel. The Zephyrians had strong computer systems but could not grasp the delicate balance needed for stable quantum fields. Only humans had developed expertise in all these areas. More importantly, only humans had learned how to combine different types of knowledge into working solutions. Dr. Sunho made it look so simple, Velcora said to her assistant as they stared at a gate that was sparking and making grinding noises. He would walk around the gate for an hour, checking different systems. Then he would make 3 or 4 small adjustments, and everything would work perfectly. Her assistant, an older Kalani named Dorshan, nodded sadly. I watched him work. Many times, he never seemed to be doing anything complicated. But when I try to copy what he did, nothing works. The problem was that Dr. Sunho had not just been following a checklist. He had been using years of experience and deep understanding to notice small problems before they became big ones. He could hear when a quantum resonator was starting to drift out of tune. He could see when crystal matrices were developing stress fractures. He could feel when a gate's energy patterns were becoming unstable. This kind of knowledge could not be learned from books. It took years of practice and the ability to understand how different systems affected each other. The aliens were discovering that expertise was not just about knowing facts. It was about understanding how those facts connected to create something larger and more complex. The situation on Kepler 4-4 to be had become desperate. Station Chief Morval was staring at atmospheric readings that terrified him. The processors had been failing slowly for weeks. Now they were close to complete shutdown. The planet's natural atmosphere contained gases that would kill any living being in minutes. The processors were the only thing standing between 2 billion inhabitants and certain death. But without the software updates that Engineer Park used to provide, processors could not handle the changing conditions in the planet's atmosphere. Morval had tried everything he could think of. He had contacted other worlds for help, but the failing gate network made communication difficult. He had tried to modify the processor software himself, but the programming was too complex for him to understand. He had even tried to find human engineers who might have stayed behind in other systems, but the humans had been thorough in their departure. Every last one had gone home to Earth. The processors had automatic safety systems that were designed to protect the machines from damage. If they detected atmospheric conditions they could not handle, they would shut down rather than risk exploding. This was smart engineering, but it meant that when the processors finally gave up, there would be no warning and no second chances. Morval's technical officer, a Kalani named Korlim, brought him the latest readings. Sir, the volcanic gases are increasing faster than we expected. The processors are already operating beyond their original design limits. I estimate we have maybe 2 weeks before they shut down completely. Morval felt sick. What about the backup processors? They are running the same outdated software, sir. They will shut down at the same time as the main systems. This was the cruel irony of human engineering. The humans had built their systems to be incredibly safe and reliable. But that same safety was now threatening to kill billions of people, because no one else knew how to maintain the technology properly across the galaxy. Similar crises were developing on dozens of worlds. Agricultural systems that fed billions were failing because no one understood how to adjust them for changing conditions. Water purification plants were breaking down because their complex biological filters needed regular maintenance that only human engineers knew how to perform. Weather control systems were going haywire because their atmospheric models required constant updates from human climatologists. The aliens had always seen these human-designed systems as simple tools that just needed to be operated, not understood. They had never realized that each system was constantly being adjusted and improved by humans who understood both the technology and the complex environments where it operated. Now, without human maintenance, even the most advanced technology was becoming useless or dangerous. The Galactic Council called emergency session after emergency session, but they could not agree on solutions. The Kalani wanted to send research teams to study each problem carefully. The Vorthines wanted to focus on the most critical issues first. The Zephyrians wanted to use military force to commandeer any remaining human technology. None of these approaches worked because the problems were all connected. The gate failures made it hard to coordinate responses to other crises. The wars disrupted supply lines that were needed to repair failing systems. The technical breakdowns made it impossible to maintain the communication networks that the Council used to make decisions. Everything the humans had built was falling apart at once, and no one else had the knowledge or skills to hold it together in the depths of space. Automated distress beacons that had been built by humans continued to broadcast emergency signals toward Earth, but Earth was far away. The remaining quantum gates were too unstable for safe long-distance travel. The galaxy was calling for help. No one was coming to answer. 1 year had passed since the humans left. The Galactic Council faced the darkest time in their history. Elder Cythera stood before the emergency assembly, her long neck curved with sadness. Behind her, a massive display showed the terrible numbers that told the story of galactic collapse. 17 worlds had become uninhabitable. 43 star systems were cut off from the rest of the galaxy. 3 major wars raged across the outer sectors. Trade had dropped to less than 10% of what it had been when humans were present. Fellow council members, Cythera began, her voice heavy with sorrow. We must face the truth. Our civilization is dying. The Great Hall was quieter than it had ever been. Many seats were empty because representatives could not travel through the failing gate network. Those who were present looked tired and defeated. The proud Vorthins sat with their forearms hanging limp. The mighty Zephyrian stared at the floor instead of meeting anyone's eyes. Counselor the Ziska spoke first. His gray skin had turned almost black with stress. We have tried everything. Our best engineers cannot fix the gates. Our strongest warriors cannot stop the wars. Our wisest leaders cannot solve the problems. Perhaps, said a small voice from the back of the hall, we have been trying the wrong things. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was Dr. Unicio, a Nexari scientist, who studied how different species think and behave. She was young for a council meeting, and many members had never heard her speak before. The Ziska made an impatient sound. Dr. Unicio, this is not the time for academic theories. We need practical solutions. But Elder Cythera raised her hand for silence. Let her speak. We have tried the practical approaches of engineers and warriors. Perhaps it is time to listen. To a scientist, Dr. Unicio walked to the center of the hall, carrying a thick folder of documents. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it. For the past year, I have been studying human behavior and achievements. I wanted to understand why they were so successful at things that we find impossible. She activated a holographic display that showed images of humans working alongside different alien species. At first, I thought humans succeeded because they were good at specific skills. They seemed to be excellent diplomats, talented engineers, and wise peacekeepers. The display changed to show technical diagrams and negotiation records. But the more I studied, the more I realized that human skills were not the most important thing. The real secret was how they thought about problems. General Rothvex growled with impatience. Thinking does not fix broken gates or stop wars. Actually, General, it does, Dr. Unicio replied respectfully.
Oh.
but not the kind of thinking we are used to. She touched a control, and the display showed a comparison chart. On one side were alien problem-solving methods. On the other side were human methods. "Look at how we approach a typical problem," she said. The Kalani studied it carefully from a theoretical perspective. The Vorthons focus on finding the most efficient practical solution. Zephyrians determine the strongest response that will prevent future problems. The Nexari consider how the problem fits into larger cultural and spiritual patterns. Nods came from around the hall. This was exactly how each species naturally approached challenges. "Each approach has value," Dr. Unisio continued. "Our separate approaches. We work in parallel, not together. Often, our different methods create conflict instead of solutions." The display changed again, showing recordings of humans at work. Humans did something completely different. They used all of our approaches at the same time. When Ambassador Lee negotiated peace between the Vorthines and the Draxian Empire, she combined Kalani wisdom about long-term consequences, Vorthine efficiency, and creating practical agreements, Zephyrian understanding of power dynamics, and Nexari respect for cultural traditions. Counselor Diska leaned forward. "But humans are not smarter than us in any of those areas. The Kalani are better at theoretical thinking. Vorthins are better at practical engineering. How could humans do what we do, but better? Because they were not trying to be better than us at our own specializations," Dr. Uniso explained. "They were doing something entirely different. They were connecting our different ways of thinking into something new." She showed a diagram that looked like a web, with different colored lines connecting various points. Humans are natural synthesizers. They take ideas from many different sources and combine them in ways that create new possibilities. This is why their technology worked so well. They did not just use Kalani physics or Vorthon engineering. They found ways to make Kalani physics and Vorthon engineering work together. The hall was completely silent now. Everyone was listening carefully. More importantly, Dr. Uniso said, "Humans could understand our perspectives without losing their own identity. Kalani negotiator might learn to think like a Vorthon, but they would stop being truly Kalani. A Zephyrian engineer might study Nexari cultural methods, but they would lose their Zephyrian directness." She paused and looked. Around the room, humans somehow managed to understand how we think while still thinking like humans. This allowed them to translate between our different approaches and find solutions that satisfied everyone. Dr. Unesio touched the control again, and the display showed failure reports from across the galaxy, without humans to bridge the gaps. "Between our different ways of thinking, we cannot work together effectively. Our specialized knowledge becomes isolated and useless." Elder Cythera spoke thoughtfully. "You are saying that the problem is not that we lack human knowledge? The problem is that we lack the human ability to connect different types of knowledge." "Exactly," Dr. Unisio replied. "We have been trying to replace human engineers with alien engineers, human diplomats with alien diplomats. But humans were not just better versions of us. They were something completely different." Counselor Daziska stood up, his massive frame towering over the small scientist. "This is interesting theory, Dr. Unisio, but how does it help us? We cannot become human." Dr. Unisio smiled for the first time during her presentation. "We cannot become human, but we can learn to work the way humans worked. We can learn to combine our different strengths instead of keeping them separate." She activated a new display showing a proposed organizational structure. Instead of having Kalani teams, Vorthon teams, and Zephyrian teams all working on the same problem separately, we create truly mixed teams. But not just mixed in membership, mixed in thinking. The diagram showed small groups with representatives from different species, but with new roles and responsibilities. Each team needs someone who specializes in theoretical analysis, someone who focuses on practical implementation, someone who considers security and strength, and someone who understands cultural implications. But most importantly, each team needs someone whose job is to help the specialists communicate and work together. General Rothvex looked skeptical. "And who would fill that last role? We have no species that naturally thinks like humans." "Any of us can learn," Dr. Unesio said confidently. Humans were not born knowing how to do this. They developed these skills over time. If we study their methods and practice working together, we can develop the same abilities. The hall erupted. In discussion, some council members were excited by the possibility. Others were doubtful that such a plan could work. Many were worried that their species would lose their cultural identity if they started thinking like humans. Elder Scythia called for order. Dr. Unesio, do you have specific recommendations for how we might begin this process? Yes, Elder. I propose we start with our most critical problems, select small teams with mixed membership, and train them to work using human methods. If these pilot teams succeed, we can expand the approach. She showed a list of urgent crises. The atmospheric processors on Kepler 442b, the quantum gate instabilities in the Centauri sector, and the ongoing war in the Outer Rim. 3 very different problems that require 3 very different types of solutions. Counselor Ziska studied the proposal carefully. This is a desperate plan based on untested theories. Yes, Dr. Unesio agreed, but we are in a desperate situation. Our current approaches are not working. At worst, this plan will fail, and we will be no worse off than we are now. At best, it might save our civilization. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the council had no choice. Traditional methods had failed completely. They had to try something new, even if it seemed impossible. Elder Cythera stood to announce the decision. The council approves Dr. Unesio's proposal. We will form experimental teams using human working methods. May the wisdom of the ancients guide us in this desperate hour. As the council members left the hall, many wondered if they were making a terrible mistake. Learning to think like humans seemed almost as impossible as becoming human, but deep in their hearts, they knew that Dr. Unesio was right. The galaxy was dying because they had forgotten how to work together. It was time to remember. 18 months after the humans left, the galaxy received its most shocking discovery yet. Dr. Unesio sat in her research lab, surrounded by thousands of documents that told the hidden story of galactic civilization. For months, she had been leading the effort to understand how humans really worked. What she found was bigger than anyone had imagined. Her assistant, a young Vorthan named Teklo, brought her another stack of files. Dr. Unesio, I have finished analyzing the trade. Agreements from the past 50 years. The pattern is the same in every single document. Dr. Unesio looked up from her computer screen. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they burned with excitement. Show me. Teklo activated a holographic display that filled the room with floating documents. Every major trade agreement, peace treaty, and diplomatic protocol has human involvement. But it is not just that humans were present. They were the ones who made everything work. The display showed a complex web of connections. Lines of light connected thousands of different agreements, showing how they all related to each other. At the center of every connection was a human name. Look at this, Teklo said, pointing to a cluster of agreements. Kepler mining rights, treaty, the Centauri Trade Protocol, and the Outer Rim Defense Agreement. They were negotiated by different species at different times. But Ambassador Hanwu worked on all 3, making sure they did not conflict with each other. Dr. Unesio nodded slowly. The humans were not just solving individual problems. They were managing the relationships between all the solutions. This was the discovery that changed everything. For centuries, the aliens had thought that galactic civilization worked because each species was good at their own specialization. The Kalani provided wisdom, the Vorthans provided engineering, the Zephyrians provided security, and so on, but the truth was much more complex. Galactic civilization worked because humans had been quietly making sure that all these different contributions fit together properly. Tech-Low brought up another display. Dr. Unesio, look at this analysis of the early warning systems. Display showed a timeline of prevented disasters over the past 2 centuries. Plague outbreaks that were stopped before they spread, natural disasters that were predicted and prepared for, economic crashes that were prevented by careful planning. I thought these systems were run by our own species, Teklo said, his voice full of surprise. But when I traced the data flows, I found that every single early warning network had human coordinators managing the information. Dr. Unesio stood up and walked to the center of the room, surrounded by the floating displays. "Show me the communication patterns." The hologram changed to show the flow of information across the galaxy. Messages between governments, scientific data sharing between research institutions, trade coordination between different worlds. It looked like a vast nervous system, with information flowing along billions of pathways and at every major junction. Every critical connection point, there was a human managing the flow. "We never saw it," Dr. Unesio whispered. "They made it look so natural that we thought it was just happening by itself." Teklo pulled up one more display. "Dr. Unesio, I think you need to see this. I found a report that was filed in the Earth Embassy archives just before the humans left." The report had been written by Intelligence Officer Nari. It was titled Assessment of Galactic Dependency on Human Integration Services. Dr. Unesio began reading, and her face grew pale. The report was devastating in its completeness. Nari had documented every way that humans were involved in keeping galactic civilization running. It was not just the obvious things like diplomacy and engineering. Humans had been managing the invisible connections that held everything together. They maintained the databases that tracked trade relationships between thousands of different worlds. They managed the communication protocols that let different species share scientific discoveries. They coordinated the logistics that kept food and medicine flowing to planets that could not produce their own. Most importantly, they had been the galaxy's institutional memory. Humans kept track of what had worked in the past and what had failed. They remembered the lessons learned from previous crises. They maintained the complex web of relationships and agreements that prevented old conflicts from starting again. According to this report, Dr. Unesio said slowly, humans were involved in 97% of all interspecies cooperation projects. They were not just participants. They were the ones who made cooperation possible. Teklo looked confused. But how could we not notice something so important? Dr. Unesio sat down heavily in her chair, because humans made it look easy. They worked behind the scenes, connecting different groups and solving problems before they became crises. Only saw the results, not the work that created them. She scrolled through more of Nuri's report. Each page revealed another layer of human involvement that the aliens had never recognized. The humans had been like the nervous system of a vast organism, carrying information and coordinating responses across the entire galaxy. "Listen to this," Dr. Unesio said, reading from the report. "Human integration specialists spend an average of 60% of their time on preventive problem solving. They identify potential conflicts, resource shortages, and system failures before they occur, then coordinate multi-species responses to prevent crises." Teklo's engineering background helped him understand the implications. That means most of the problems humans solved, we never even knew existed. We only saw them handle the crises that they could not prevent. Dr. Unesio continued reading. Projected outcome of human withdrawal. Complete breakdown of interspecies cooperation. Within 18 to 24 months, galactic civilization cannot survive without human integration services. The room fell silent.
Nari
Had written this report 18 months ago. Her predictions were coming true exactly as she had described, but the most shocking part of the report was still to come. Dr. Unesio found a section titled Recommended Actions for Galactic Maturation. "The withdrawal is not intended as punishment," she read aloud. "It is designed to force galactic civilization to develop its own integration capabilities. Humans cannot continue to serve as the galaxy's coordinators indefinitely. For true galactic maturation to occur, other species must learn to work together without human mediation." Teklo stared at the holographic text. "They planned this. The humans left on purpose to teach us a lesson." Dr. Unesio shook her head. "Not to teach us. A lesson to force us to grow up." She found another section of the report and read it carefully. Human analysis indicates that continued dependence on human integration services will prevent other species from developing necessary cooperative abilities. Withdrawal, while temporarily destabilizing, is the only path to long-term galactic independence. The implications were staggering. The humans had not left in anger or frustration. They had left because they realized that their help was actually hurting the galaxy's long-term development. As long as humans were there to solve problems and coordinate cooperation, the other species would never learn to do these things themselves. The galaxy would remain permanently dependent, never growing beyond the need for human guidance. It is like parents teaching a child to walk, Teklo said slowly. Eventually, they have to let go and let the child try on their own, even if the child falls down. Dr. Unesio nodded. Except in this case, the child is an entire galactic civilization. Falling down means wars, famines, and system failures. She stood up and began pacing around the room. The humans knew this would happen. They knew we would struggle. They knew people would die. But they also knew it was the only way for us to become truly independent. Teklo looked at the displays showing all the current crises. Do you think their plan is working? Are we learning to work together? Dr. Unesio thought about the experimental teams that had been formed based on her recommendations. Early reports were mixed. Some teams were starting to show progress in solving complex problems. Others were still struggling with basic communication. We are learning, she said finally. It is slow and painful, but we are starting to understand what humans did for us. More importantly, we are beginning to learn how to do it ourselves. She pulled up a final document from Nari's report. It was a timeline showing the projected stages of galactic recovery. According to human analysis, the crisis phase would last about 2 years. Then would come a period of gradual learning and adaptation. Finally, if the galaxy survived, would come a new era of true independence. Nari estimated that if we could learn to work together without human help, our civilization would become stronger than it ever was with them, Dr. Unesio said. But only if we survive the learning process. Teklo looked at the timeline. They were halfway through the crisis phase. The hardest part was still ahead. Do you think we can do it? He asked. Dr. Unesio looked at all the evidence surrounding them. The reports of cooperation beginning to emerge from the experimental teams. The first successful repairs to quantum gates by mixed species engineering groups. The preliminary peace talks between warring factions led by multi-species diplomatic teams. Yes, she said quietly. I think we can. The humans believed we could, or they never would have left. Now we just have to prove them right. Outside her lab, across the galaxy, the slow work of learning continued. Species that had never trusted each other were beginning to work together. Problems that had seemed impossible were slowly being solved. The galaxy was growing up, one painful step at a time. 2 years after the humans left, everything changed. Elder Cythera stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Wisdom's Path, watching Earth grow larger through the viewport. Behind her, representatives from every major species in the galaxy waited nervously. This was the first time in galactic history that such a delegation had traveled to the human homeworld. They were not coming as conquerors, or even as equals. They were coming to ask for help. The journey to Earth had taken 3 months through the partially repaired gate network. The mixed species engineering teams had managed to stabilize several critical gates using the methods Dr. Unesio had developed. It was slow work, and the repairs were not as elegant as human engineering, but they worked. Elder Cythera, said Captain Hackjin, the Vorthon pilot of their ship. We are receiving a transmission from Earth Defense Command. The main screen activated, showing a human woman in a dark blue uniform. She had short black hair and calm eyes that seemed to see everything. I am Captain Hackjin of Earth's Defense. Welcome to the Sol System, delegates. Please follow the navigation beacons to Lunar Station 7. Elder Cythera stepped forward. Captain Hackjin, I am Elder Cythera of the Galactic Council.
Hey.
We request an audience with your leaders. Captain Hackjin's expression did not change. Your request has been noted, Elder. Please dock at the station and await further instructions. The screen went dark. The delegation members looked at each other with uncertainty. They had expected anger, demands for apologies, or even refusal to meet with them. This calm politeness was somehow more unsettling. When they docked at the lunar station, They were greeted by a small group of humans in simple gray uniforms. No weapons, no ceremony, no signs of either hostility or welcome. It's just quiet efficiency. "The Council of Earth will see you in 6 hours," announced a young human woman. "Quarters have been prepared for your delegation. Please make yourselves comfortable." As they were escorted to their rooms, the aliens noticed something that surprised them. The lunar station was beautiful. The corridors were filled with art that seemed to combine styles from dozens of different worlds. Gardens with plants from many species grew in perfect harmony. Music played softly from hidden speakers, splendid melodies that no single species could have created alone. Counselor the Siska stopped at a viewing window that looked out at Earth. The blue and white planet turned slowly below them, peaceful and undisturbed. "They do not seem like people who are angry with us," he said quietly. Dr. Unesio joined him at the window. "Perhaps they are not angry. Perhaps they are just different now." 6 hours later, the delegation was brought to a large circular chamber at the heart of the station. The room had no throne, no raised platform, no symbols of power. Instead, there was a simple round table with chairs arranged in a circle. 7 humans entered the room and took seats at the table. They wore no special uniforms or badges of rank. They looked like ordinary people, but there was something in their manner that spoke of quiet confidence and deep wisdom. The woman in the center spoke first. "I am Minister So-young, speaking for the Council of Earth. We welcome you to our home." Elder Cythera bowed respectfully. "Minister So-young, we come before you with humility and great need. Our galaxy is dying, and we have learned that only with human help can it be saved." Minister So-young nodded slowly. "We know of your struggles. We have been watching." This simple statement sent a chill through the delegation. Humans had been watching. They knew what was happening, but they had not intervened. Counselor the Ziska leaned forward. "If you knew we were in trouble, why did you not help us?" Another human, an older man with gray hair, answered. "'Cause helping you was the problem, Counselor. As long as we've solved your crises, you never learn to solve them yourselves." The gray-haired man gestured to a wall display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Many areas were still in crisis, but others showed signs of recovery. "You have made progress. The experimental teams are working. Some worlds have been saved. Wars have been stopped. You are learning." Dr. Unisio spoke up. "You found Intelligence Officer Nari's report. We know that you've planned this. You left us on purpose to force us to grow." Minister So-young smiled sadly. "Nari was very thorough. Yes, we planned the withdrawal. It was the hardest decision humanity has ever made. We knew people would die. We knew civilizations would suffer. We also knew it was the only way for the galaxy to truly mature." Elder Cythera felt tears forming in her eyes. "So many have died because of our ignorance. So many worlds have been lost." "Yes," said a younger human woman, "and we carry that weight too. Every death, every lost world, every moment of suffering could have been prevented if we had stayed, but the cost of staying would have been the permanent infancy of galactic civilization." The room fell silent for a long moment. Finally, Counselor the Iziska spoke. "We have come to ask you to return, to resume your role in galactic affairs." Minister So-young shook her head gently. "We cannot return to our old role. That would undo all the progress you have made, but we can offer you something else." She stood and walked to the wall display, changing it to show a new image. It was a diagram of a proposed galactic organization, but it looked completely different from the old council structure. "We propose a partnership," Minister So-young said. "Not a return to the old system where humans solved problems for you. Instead, we will work together as equals to build a new kind of galactic civilization." The diagram showed mixed councils with representatives from all species, including humans. But the humans were not in charge. They were integrated into the structure as partners, not leaders. "The new system will be based on shared responsibility," explained the gray-haired man. "Every species contributes their strengths. Every species takes responsibility for maintaining what we build together." Dr. Unesio studied the diagram carefully. "This would require us to continue working the way the experimental teams have been working. Mixed groups, shared knowledge, constant cooperation." "Exactly," said Minister Sawyung. You have proven that you can work this way. The quantum gates you have repaired, the conflicts you have resolved, the lives you have saved, all of this was done without humans taking the lead. You did it yourselves. Elder Cythera felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. But we lost so much while we were learning. The youngest human at the table, a man who looked barely out of his teens, spoke for the first time. Every growing civilization pays a price for maturity. The question is whether you will use what you have learned to prevent future suffering. Minister Sawyung returned to her seat. We offer humanity's knowledge and experience as partners in building a better galaxy, but we will not return as your caretakers. Those days are over. The delegation spent hours discussing the proposal. The humans were patient, answering questions and explaining details, but they were also firm. Humanity would participate in galactic civilization again, but only as equals in a truly cooperative system. As the meeting ended, Elder Cythera had one final question. Why? Why are you willing to help us after everything that has happened? Minister Sawyung smiled, and for the first time there was real warmth in her expression. Because you are here. Because you made the journey to Earth not as conquerors demanding our return, but as students asking to learn, because you have proven that. The galaxy can grow beyond its dependence on us. She stood and extended her hand to Elder Cythera. The galaxy we will build together will be stronger than the one that came before. It will be built on cooperation instead of dependence, on shared strength instead of individual specialization. 1 year later, Elder Cythera stood in the new Galactic Assembly Hall. The building was on a neutral world. It's designed by architects from a dozen different species working together. The council chamber had no single throne or podium. Instead, it had workstations where mixed teams could collaborate on problems in real time. Ambassador Hanwoo sat at one of these workstations, but he was not alone. Next to him sat Counselor Thiska Dr. Unesio, and engineers from 3 different worlds. They were working together to design better quantum gates, not human gates maintained by others, but truly collaborative technology that no single species could have created. Alone, the galaxy was still healing. There were still problems to solve, still conflicts to resolve, still systems to repair, but now the work was shared. The burden was carried by all species together. It's not placed on human shoulders alone. As Elder Cythera watched the mixed teams working together, she realized that the humans had given them something more valuable than their services. They had given them the ability to stand on their own. The galaxy had grown up at last. And for the first time in its history, it was truly free.